There's the red square. Good afternoon here, Thursday, February 20th, 2025, in House Transportation. Continuing our accountability and oversight portion as the legislature, reviewing requirements of the past T-bills. We have Dan Courier and Ross McConnell in here to give us the mobility service guide update. And with that, I guess we'll ask questions as we go or not.
Please. Yes.
We will turn it over to you to let us know what you've been up to.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the time here today. As was mentioned, I'm Dan Courier. I'm a public transit coordinator with the Agency of Transportation in the public transit section. Ross, right over there, is my manager. And I was the lead staff person at the agency working on this requirement under the Act 148 of 2024 to develop a mobility service guide. Oh, and 1 second, let me make sure I can click. Yes, very good. Just to give the committee a quick reminder on what the guide is supposed to include. I've just highlighted in yellow some of the key sentences from the legislation. And so the agency, in consultation with existing nonprofits and mobility service organizations, shall develop a web-based guide to outline the different mobility service modals that could be considered for deployment in Vermont. So with this in mind, and these additional requirements, we set out to start working with nonprofits in Vermont and service mobility providers to gather the information, including defining the program types and options, gathering information on existing initiatives, detailing the other existing programs that may provide foundations for new programs. And then for each of the items that we gathered from the nonprofits, we also developed a range of costs, capital and facility and ongoing operation and maintenance costs, what type of characteristics that service area included, any revenue capture options that there were for that mode, and then technical assistant resources, and then potential funding as well. So, with the service guides, after we had done a series of interviews and surveys with nonprofits across Vermont and the operators, we concluded that it would be best to organize the guides into three service types. The service types are one, active transportation, to include biking and walking types of services and options. Ride sharing, which includes our carpool, vanpool, and car share modes in Vermont. And then passenger transportation, which includes both trip planning for the transit system, as well as microtransit operations, and then door-to-door transportation services. Think of them as like our Gopher or our special service transportation agency up in Chittenden County, providing door-to-door service for older adults and persons with disabilities. With those three service types in mind, we then thought about the requirements to have the guides be web-based and what that would look like to be presented to the public. And so we landed on using a PDF format for the guides to be actually presented to the public and the communities so that they can be easily read, accessible, and then downloadable as well. And then we'll use in Vermont, the Go Vermont program already is a resource for mobility, including providing resources on transit and carpool matching. And so we felt the guides would naturally land on this website, which is connectingcommuters.org, and have a section dedicated to these resource guides so that someone could both book a trip but understand how they might implement a new trip type of mode in their community. In the packet for the testimony today, it include the draft of the three guides as PDFs, and so that should be available for you to download. The screenshot of the active transportation portion of the text of that PDF, and so Again, active transportation included walking and biking modes. And so we worked with partners, including Local Motion, CATMA, our Walk to Shop program grant, and then we chatted with our own agency's Bike and Ped program as well about options and what this would look like to be presented on the guide. You can see it kind of ranges in detail from where Walk to Shop includes both the costs as well as the ongoing capital, the description of the transportation service area. And in the bike share example, it talks more about the operator and how that program is funded. And so some notes about the guide. As we go through these, we've already started to consider edits to them, including wanting for instance, the CATMA bike share. We did learn recently that the Bird provider of that system is not coming back to Burlington this spring. And so we'll need to revise that bike share section slightly to remove CATMA from it, but really highlight the idea that bike share is something that can occur in Vermont. And if you want a recent example, go to CATMA for that information. And then trying to bring Walk to Shop, if you're not familiar with it, it's a program that is bringing roller bags to communities so that they can access food more easily, because multiple bags of food on our buses is not something that's allowed. So having one bag to carry all your food is something that's more beneficial for both the transit agencies as well as the users of transit to access food. And so we want to add more details to this so that there is just a little bit more context on how a community could implement this program since it's already been started, right? And how do we utilize that? So,
Representative Burke?
Yeah, I just have a question. You said multiple bags of food are not allowed on buses?
that's right.
You
You
have to
have,
get in with, walked in with two grocery bags, they will not be able to.
well, it's two is probably okay. Our code of conduct on the bus instructs riders to keep your bags in your control, right? So if you have one bag that you can keep in your control, that's fine. If it's two, that might be okay. But if it's 3, 4, and 5, and suddenly you have bags that might empty up, if you were to get into a crash, it's all about safety of the passengers and the drivers, right? So as long as you can keep the bag in your control and it meets the rider code of conduct, then you're fine. But yes, limited
So
number
these-
of bags
these,
is true.
These roller bags or whatever, you could put a lot of food in.
Up to 50 pounds of groceries could go into it. Yep, yep.
Those are like talking about,
All
the old
Representative Burke?
fashioned.
Except these are very modern. This is correct. Yes, yes.
What's different? I mean, it's the same.
Great. It is the
Okay.
exact same style that you're thinking of, but these ones are
Yes.
made of canvas. They have
Okay.
better wheels, easier to carry.
Okay.
There's a handle, there's pockets in them to allow you to attach them to other things. And so,
And so what is it, what the idea is that it sits in front of you in your seat?
that's correct.
Okay. That's,
Yeah, and sometimes if the bus might be a little emptier, you might be able to have it in the
Next.
space next to you, but ideally it's in front of you
Okay.
and in your control.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
You can lift them up onto the bus.
Exactly. Yep, you can kind of go up the steps, although any bus, any rider can request the use of the ramp on any of our buses, whether you have a disability or not. And so any rider can request that the ramp be deployed to if the bag is too heavy to go upstairs. The second guide, just to remind, is all about ride sharing. And so this is people riding in vehicles that they own, or in the case of van pools, we have a contractor that is providing that service, and they use the Commute with Enterprise vehicles, but it's a citizen of Vermont driving that vehicle. And so, so the guide on this portion is highlighting the carpool portion, the van pool program, and Rideshare Vermont as well as a rideshare option for Vermonters. The third one is all about passenger transportation. And so the first section talks about our trip planning and what it took to establish our a program for our transit app. We talked about microtransit and the operations across Vermont. And then we go into our door-to-door transportation options, which are the two here on the slide are Vermont Public Transit Association and Gopher. But there's a second page that talks about a few other options in Vermont that do door-to-door transportation, what those programs deliver, and how they were started as well. So. So the PDFs, once finalized, we really envision landing on the Go Vermont website. Here's a screenshot of our resources page. We really see those mobility guides landing here. I've done a mock-up of what the site might look like. And so where you've got the mobility service guides over to the right, and anyone could click on those, and then it would navigate you to a single resource page. This resource page is our transportation guides page, but I really envision the resource guides to look exactly like this, where you've got a banner across the top with text describing what the guides are and how anyone can use them, and then a downloadable PDF below that with an image of them. And so in this case, we've translated all of our transportation guides as well into the 8 commonly spoken languages in Vermont to provide accessibility. We're still discussing whether we want to pre-translate those guides, the mobility guides that is, or whether we want to do it on request. And so that's still up for discussion, but we're thinking about it as well. The guides themselves, as I mentioned, draft is out. So we are looking for comments and suggestions on them. VTrans, as well as the nonprofits that we worked with to gather the information, will all have a chance to review them and make sure the content is correct as they would like it presented. Our next steps are to finalize those, go through, make sure the PDFs are accessible, and update them in the formats as best we can. And then to then focus on the Go Vermont website, creating that resource guide section, and then also updating across the entire platform the different active guides, because we've got bike and ped sections of our website, we've got public transit sections of our website. All of those will need to have a corresponding link to the transportation guides as well. So. That's all I came to present on, but I'm happy to open up the PDFs and go in more detail about them if you wish. Our deadline for finalizing all this work is December of this year. So if the committee would like me to come back and present on what the final versions of the PDF are and what the website looks like, I'm happy to do that.
Please.
Thank you for this.
Thank you.
And just a really big picture. When I'm, looking at the Go Vermont website mock-up and where mobility service guides would go,
Yep.
Gives me a little bit more information in terms of like what mobility service guides actually means. Like just as a member of the public, when I look at that and I think, is it people who need assistance with mobility?
Sure.
Is it just ride sharing? So mobility, it's a little bit confusing. It makes me question further, what exactly is a mobility service guide?
Sure.
So I just want to give that feedback just kind of as, because and then looking at what you've just taken us through, we're looking at ways for people to go shopping and bring their items on public transit, ways to car share. But it wasn't entirely clear to me at the beginning. So I just want to share that.
No, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And we use a lot of the direction from the legislature and the text in the act to develop our products. And so, but we do often change the names in the end. And so, but thank you for that. Yeah.
Representative Rowland?
I would second that, make it really clear.
Yes.
Where do you want to go? How do you want to get there?
Yep.
Like layman's terms, No, I don't think anybody really kind of thinks about what are my mobility services available to me. I don't know.
No, thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
The audience also came up in a previous presentation that we gave, like, who's the true audience of this and making sure that that's presented correctly. So absolutely heard that as well. That we presented at. Thank you.
Representative Keith.
And maybe a bit off the reservation here, but the autonomous vehicles. Anything, what do you got there?
I am not versed in that.
I knew I
but you see
was, so I've
Patrick,
gone way
in the
off,
room.
and sorry, I won't even, I'll bring that up another time.
Yes.
Would probably be looking at the long range plans and where and when to incorporate those autonomous opportunities. Sure.
Identify.
Ross McDonald, Public Transit Program Manager. My apologies, Mr. We're looking at those developments and think that if the technology can catch up, there's some real opportunity to share vehicles, to get more bang for a buck with those vehicle investments.
Have you seen any studies about how that operates best? I mean, is it better in a rural? I mean, I can think of rural environments with where the large buses don't carry anybody, and you might be able to get some real economies here, or is it an urban type of environment?
At this point, we
Sorry.
need lines on the roads and not on dirt roads, right? What we've seen are pilots, and those pilots are going from point A to point B to sporting events, airports. Those seem to be working a little bit better than the ones that are being dynamically routed. But those are the pilots that are being discussed at conferences we attend.
I did see a Waymo in San Diego. They brought the car in and we could take a look. We couldn't get in it and have it drive us, but it could almost look like a radar thing on the top. But I've always thought, because we did this a couple of years ago, didn't we have a pilot that was, we had an autonomous vehicle?
Was to allow
We had some,
towns,
yeah.
towns to allow
Yeah.
autonomous vehicles to be
3 or 4
used in
years
the
ago.
towns or something.
Yeah, my concern is in the winter time when there may not be a line to see because of snow.
And sometimes cameras pick up some snow and nobody will stop,
And you can't.
or the branch from the tree has grown so large that it's now being picked up by a video camera and they're stopping, on a moment's notice because of those types of pieces. So we're learning a lot,
Right.
and what we're learning is we got a long ways to go.
Mhm. I mean, I think Phoenix uses them, I think San Diego and San Francisco, I mean, that western, that doesn't really have to worry about snow or ice or, yeah. And in more urban settings, cities, yeah.
More demand in smaller areas, makes a number of.
Off topic, sorry.
As long as we continue to go to the witnesses and to the witnesses' helpers, we got to continue to go this way to the witnesses and witnesses' helpers, as opposed to across, even though this one's not controversial, some are. Representative Howard, you're up.
Yeah, Dan, thanks for this, and it's, I'll say more than I was thinking. But one of my goals in helping move this forward was to provide to communities. If you have a community, they say, hey, how can we, get more local transportation? What are the opportunities? I think this does it. It shows, hey, these are different things. Or if they wanted to look at microtransit, they have the links, they can know who to talk to. But as you're finalizing it, it's, that question, how can we help our elderly get around in our town? What are people doing to do that? And what does it cost? And how, what are the options there? So, hopefully it helps do that for
Yes.
communities.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's where I can go back to the audience, statement that I've gotten previously. So yeah, that's so important. And we definitely have that as the goal for these guides. So.
Great, thank you.
Excellent.
Representative Burke.
Well, speaking of that, I'm just wondering for people, maybe elderly people who are not using computers, how do they find out about this? Do you have things to put in the library or,
Oh, that's a great suggestion. The Go Vermont program does have a call center, and that call center is staffed with all of these guides as well. And so that call center could easily answer a question or help them to understand a program.
If somebody could know how to call,
Yep.
like put something, if you want to know more about how to get around.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the library, I'm thinking about, town offices.
Yeah. And we create handouts, and we present a lot of them at conferences and
Senior
workshops with senior centers, libraries, exactly. We could definitely do that. So, yep. We also rely a lot on our transit agencies to be our eyes and ears on the ground. We can't be everywhere. And so that is one thing. And they use a lot of our resources. We send them copies of all these guides. And so, thank you.
I guess what I was, I'm sorry, I was a side piece to it, especially more towards new members, and I might be a little bit off base, but as we build the T-bill, what we're doing right now, we're going back and looking at things that we had asked for. As the new members, if there are projects or there are particular pieces, may or may not fit exactly into a bill or into a spot, these are some of the ways that we perhaps have had certain missions among members, or that the way that they somehow get carried forward. Representative Couch seems to be particularly, again, back to my old long-standing joke, if I had known I was going to sit in this seat, I'd have a little better attention. But I think this is like a number of the reports we're hearing about things that were added in. So
Yeah,
I want
I
to speak
think,
to that for a second.
sure. So over a couple of years, I'm very interested in, towns like the town I come from. We used to have Heinsberg Rides, which was a volunteer program that, you could get a ride to a doctor's and stuff all by volunteer. And then sitting here and looking at all of these options that sort of came up. Oh, we have, micro transit, we have this, we have that. And to me, I was just sort of getting confused. There's so much out there. How does a community decide what might work? And so by putting it all in one place, at least it's all there and you can sort of point people to it. Not just riders, but, people who want to help do this. And then, so that was sort of the overall purpose. I don't think it really existed before. You had to sort of find your way around.
This is true, yeah. And that's actually why we organized them to 3 guides. So someone that wanted to do just walking and biking didn't need to go through all the stuff on ride sharing, and vice versa. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we're ready to move on to the next piece then, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ross. Thank you for joining us. I guess we're up to, going to be, Dan is joining us from Zoom, right?
Still me.
I'm looking at the wrong.
Oh, it's the other Dan.
Yes, Dan Delabrie.
We must have missed the train.
We missed the train. We're moving on to, I'm sorry, a different Dan, yes, but thank you, Dan. And, I'm sorry. Okay. We're just having a little bit of transition. We're not taking a break. We're gonna have a little bit of transition.
To your question.
Yes, take it, leave.
Thank you. Yeah, it would be acceptable if we could both sit, that would be great.
I recognize the Dan behind you, but I don't think that David and I have had a chance to meet before.
No, we haven't, sir. Well, welcome. Thank you. David Pelletier from Beatrice.
Let me know when you guys think you're ready to go, and
Thank you.
Dan, you can hear us back there? All righty. Yeah. When you guys think that we're ready to go, our next spot that we're moving on to in this legislative oversight and accountability portion, one of the requirements was, and is in the law, for the Vermont Rail Plan update is required every so often. I'm sure they're going to give us plenty more background on what the timeframes are and what they have to update and where it's at. And We have frequent flyer on the screen and a couple of maybe returns from, but not in the last couple of years. So, or at least maybe I wasn't here that day, but we're just about ready to move on to the next spot and welcome to committee. Zoe, David, and when you're ready, it's all, and Dan in the background, it's all yours.
Thank you. My browser is joining right now. I'm told.
Space.
Oh, thank you.
Spinning. Give it a couple of seconds. It looks like it's progressing.
While we're having a little bit of technical pieces, I would like to take a second to let the committee know that tomorrow morning's agenda has been updated on the website after floor tomorrow. The first thing we're going to do is work with Damien, our legislative counsel, on we have to respond to the House Appropriations letter regarding budget and what our number one priority is. And the vice chair had suggested a 1 and 1A. So we need to instruct our legislative counsel tomorrow morning after floor to draft that letter and what we wanted to say. So is tomorrow. Yes, we have some other presenters and some advocates that are generally on Friday. We try to invite advocates as a response to a number of people that have asked. But tomorrow morning, right after floor, we have some important committee work to do in getting our response to House Appropriations underway to meet the 26th deadline for the return response. So if you're right after floor tomorrow, we will get to that.
Are you going to finalize our request? Is that it?
The letter asks us to highlight our number one priority in our transportation budget.
By when?
We have to respond to the letter by the 26th.
By the 26th.
Right, and so tomorrow we're going to discuss what that letter should say and give him the instructions to write it. And then he'll come back and present it and then we'll send it.
So we would need to have it finalized by the 26th or
Yes.
before that.
It has to be delivered on the 26th, but we have time. We have full screen right now. We're planning on discussing it and instructing tomorrow and finalizing it that morning of the 26th and having him deliver it down there by lunchtime on the 26th. Is our current plan.
All set.
And our side note is done and we'll welcome officially. And I guess I'll let you take it over, introduce and
Great.
let us know where we're at and welcome to committee.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us. I'm Dave Pelletier in the policy and planning section at VTrans, and this will be a bit of a group effort, if you will. Zoe Niederland works in policy and planning as well, and you're all familiar with the handsome devil on the screen behind me, Dan Delabria, the Rail Bureau Director. So we're here to follow up on Act 148, the T-Bill Section 30 requirement. We were embarking upon the rail plan update, which we do every 4 years or so at the agency. And there were a couple of specific items that were requested of us for investigation. One was adding additional daily service on the Vermonter. I'm going to summarize these real quickly to keep moving along. The other was expanding service on the Valley Flyer down from Massachusetts up to Brattleboro and or White River Junction in particular. So we took a look at that. There was also a question about bringing bicycles on the Vermonter and Ethan Allen Express service, which we have some information for you about that actually Dan Delabria will share with you. And then just overall, we'll give you kind of all those bits of information in the context of a quick primer on the rail system in Vermont and the rail plan update itself. And then we'll leave you with slide or two on how to become involved with the rail plan update, which we're right in the middle of at this point. So one more slide for me, then I'm going to hand it off to Zoe. Rail matters in Vermont. I know I probably don't need to say this to the Transportation Committee, but it's a really important part of our transportation system.
There's about 580 active miles of rail line in the state. And somewhat uniquely, the state owns a significant portion of that. Just under 300 miles is owned by the state and in many cases leased out for operation by operators. In terms of freight, the rail system carries approximately 2 million tons of freight per year in the state. And then, of course, the passenger services are sort of like the marquee of the transfer or of the rail system, I think, for many people. The Vermonter service and the Ethan Allen Express service are the two services that Amtrak operates in the state. And those services in federal fiscal year 23 accounted for over 116,000 passengers that either boarded or alighted in Vermont. The overall numbers for the route are significantly higher than that, but many of the numbers that we're going to show you in this presentation are oriented toward Vermont ridership, just to kind of give you an advanced kind of heads up about that for context. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Zoe, who's the project manager for the rail plan update.
Good afternoon. When we think about the success of rail in Vermont, some of it comes from thinking ahead in the 1960s when there was disinvestment underway in rail nationwide, and the state decided to purchase and protect a lot of right of way. We follow in those footsteps with maintaining a solid rail plan. The rail plan helps us think ahead at least 20 years. We're looking ahead at 2045. It is a requirement, and it is important that we think through well both the trends that are underway and what's happening in the rail system, but also what specific projects or specific needs we have, because for a variety of grants, the project needs to be listed in the rail plan to be eligible. The update of the rail plan is also an opportunity to work with a wide range of partners, in particular our regional planning commissions, on how we can all work together to support rail and other Vermont goals. The rail plan supports the rail plan covers not just rail, but how we freight movement and long-range transportation planning for the state, for climate action, for economic development, for land use, for communities. So the goals of the rail plan cover those subjects. I'm not going to read them to you, but in summary, they cover a diverse, coordinated set of goals. And the main change from the last rail plan would be adding resilience in the last item there. We are actually doing nationally innovative work in expanding the existing transportation resilience planning tool that VTrans developed for roads and structures to rail. And we hear that that's fairly unique and impressive. That's largely set and will support our work in this goal area. Thank you. I refer to this as the Vermonter Corridor because we're exploring several initiatives that would increase rail service in that corridor, even if they're not called Vermonter. So we're looking at these following initiatives that would expand service on the Vermonter, the day train extension to Montreal, which naturally would be a big effort and one that would have to be done before looking at 2 trains per day to Montreal, and then thinking about the scheduling, for example, a night train coming back from Montreal. The Valley Flyer operates on those same tracks. So an expansion coming north from Massachusetts up into Vermont of the Valley Flyer serves as similar goals. And there was room for interpretation of how the legislature meant the language of Act 30. So we wanted to cover also that we've been exploring the extension of the Valley Flyer at a perhaps lower budget level to Brattleboro or at a more complete level to White River Junction. So we've requested our consultants to do some relatively basic modeling, if you would. This is not sophisticated modeling because there is additional detailed modeling that will follow up. Let me move that closer.
Yeah.
Or
Sure.
sorry.
Yeah.
You probably didn't want to watch me peer over Dave's folder. So, in federal fiscal year, the base ridership, the 2023 ridership was considered the base for the modeling effort. So on the Vermonter, so this is to underline, to differentiate from the total Vermont rail ridership that you saw in the earlier slide. The base is approximately 70,000 riders boarding and alighting, and that is growing substantially already this year. And the one of these initiatives that was modeled that I do want to comment on a little bit more is, even at the level of basic modeling, this one was what we were calling a thought project, a thought exercise, because we can expect that not as many people would be interested in a train coming from Montreal that would arrive in Vermont at 2 or 3 in the morning. And so we took the liberty of just a thought exercise of reducing the likely ridership. So what you see here is a summary of the results, and we can provide more detail on any of this. But for a medium growth rate in terms of population by county, and we also explored the low and high, for each of these scenarios that I described to you, which I'm referring to as the Vermonter corridor expansion scenarios. We have the no build, the Vermonter to Montreal, the twice daily. I just need to say that this is not in-depth, detailed modeling. The night train, again, slightly reduced, but at a light thought exercise level of detail. Expansion of one knowledge corridor Valley Flyer train to Brattleboro, and then one to White River Junction. There will be more information about this at our public meeting and on the Rail Plan Update webpage. I'm also happy to take any questions on that, or I can continue. What is your preference?
We'll take questions. Representative McCoy.
So where is the Knowledge Corridor Valley Flyer train coming from to Brattleboro?
From Springfield? Coming
Yeah.
from Northampton and Springfield, and
Also it's coming.
so it's,
Yes,
yeah,
north.
Okay, and the same with the White River Junction when you're coming from.
Yes.
Hanson. Okay, and it wouldn't be one train that stops in Brattleboro and it continues on to White River, or is it?
If I may?
Yeah.
It would be, well, that much is not decided at this point. This analysis is based purely on population and growth factors that are applied. It doesn't get into the operations
Okay.
schedules. That's the next level of service development planning that I'll speak to in just a couple slides. So this is just kind of a course. What would the demand possibly be?
Okay, all right, thank you.
Representative White and then Representative Case.
So, and I think Representative McCoy asked this, but so the knowledge corridor is the
it is.
section from Springfield, Mass to White River Junction?
If Dan could probably answer that question.
Yeah,
Better.
essentially, yeah, it goes from Springfield, exactly, and it goes, so it's more like straight up from Springfield, right up the Connecticut River line.
I'm just unfamiliar with the knowledge corridor language. I didn't know quite what that meant, but that's
Through like
just,
Holyoke, and then up to Greenfield, and then up Brattleboro and White River.
okay, so it's a section of the Valley Flyer.
Yeah, the Valley Flyer actually starts in New Haven, Connecticut, and comes all the way up to Mass and all the way,
Yes.
yeah.
I'm familiar. I've had children back and forth to school on that many times, but thank you for that clarification.
Representative Case.
Does the program make money? I mean, at the end of the year, just the way it is right now, without adding, do you guys make money? Or do the
I should let
taxpayers?
Dan.
Yeah, Dan can speak best to the financial aspects of the service.
Yeah, so unfortunately, there's not a transportation asset in the country that makes money. I think all of our transportation assets between rail, aviation, highways, everything is subsidized. So we do not make money. We subsidize these trains.
Do we make any money at all? Is there any, do we?
Oh,
get some of it
yeah,
back?
we do get ticket revenue, which offsets costs. But so for our two trains, the Vermonter and the Ethan Allen last year, if you take the ticket revenue and the cost, and we still subsidized both those trains a little over $8 million.
All right, on the cargo end, do we make any money on that end?
So we own, as Dave was saying, we own about 300 miles of rail assets, active freight railroad in the state of Vermont. We have lease operating agreements with Vermont Rail Systems. They do pay us money based on their revenue. So the more money they make, the more money we make. But to answer your bottom line question, we do not make enough revenue to offset the cost of the asset. But again, there's no transportation assets. The airports, the highways, none of them do.
Yeah. There's no business plans.
Representative Burke?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that, one of the, impetus for looking at that extension of the train is that the Greenfield is about 20 miles from Brattleboro. And Brattleboro is a very well-used station. And I know people, myself included, because of timing, sometimes have to drive down to Greenfield to get the train because the schedule works with what you're trying to do. So I think that was one of the reasons to think about, would this, the state then would get more ticket prices from that. And then same thing to White River. And I think the thought about going to White River is when they were proposing this was just, well, what would be possible? Is this a possibility? It'd be possible to go to Brattleboro. 20 miles, it'd be possible to go to White River, 60, 70 miles.
No, so I'm gonna sort of add on to that question, and it's something I've asked before, and honestly, I don't remember what the answer was, or if there was an answer. I think the rail, the Amtrak coming, to Burlington, and the ridership is up, it's very successful. But and I like to take the train, but sometimes the timing isn't quite right. So I find myself and many people I talk to that, if they're going to New York City, they'll go down to Albany and catch the station there. They'll drive down there. Or, it sounds like the same thing. Going to New Haven, you're going to drive down to Greenfield and catch the number of trains that are there. And when we discussed, hey, how can we get more connections to these other, connect to multiple lines. And when it was discussed, it said, well, Amtrak train is quite costly. You have an engine or two, maybe, and 3 or 4 cars. And I had brought up, the concept of a bud car. I'm not saying from the 1950s we use one, but aren't there, aren't there services that are using like single cars, so that you don't need an entire train, but a single car that could go a couple times during the day and sort of make those connections for people. It's not going to be, 500 people, but it might be 80 people or 60 people who are doing like I'm doing, driving there now and parking. So I just kind of put that out there. Is that even a possibility? Are there rail services in the country that do that type of thing?
If I may start a response, I want to note, in part because of your previous presentation, that we work closely with the VTrans public transit staff. on better interconnecting, including cross-ticket purchasing and discounts for cross-ticket purchasing with bus service that gets people more frequently to the larger train stations. And I appreciate what you're saying, but at a budget, out of respect for budget, it is a more efficient manner to address that need by better interconnection of various modes, interticketing, better information, better connections. I don't know if you want to add to
Yeah.
that, but I did want to bring that up.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll add, and then if Dan wants to tag anything on, he's certainly much more of an expert. It's far easier to work out through ticketing intercity bus scenario for the situation or for what you're describing than it is to get something else operating on the rail line itself, which is it intuitively seems straightforward, but is wrought with complications and complexities in terms of agreements and other trains operating and safety considerations and whatnot. So that covers my expertise on that. And if Dan wants to add any more detail to that, I'd be happy.
Yeah, so I think this question gets asked quite often, and it's a good question. It's the difference is, so when you start talking about single car, self-propelled cars, that's a type of piece of equipment that wouldn't generally travel, hundreds of miles. So like from White River down to Springfield or even further. That's a type of equipment that's going to travel back and forth, more used as a commuter rail type of scenario. What Amtrak is an intercity passenger rail service. So it's more of a, it's going to go several hundred miles back and forth. And it's not going to go 10 times a day. It's going to go once or twice, or some, in the bigger markets, it goes more. But in Vermont, we just probably don't have that demand and to piggyback on what Dave and Zoe were saying, it's probably more cost effective to fill that need with an intercity bus.
How are we, so I appreciate the feedback, and that makes sense. And at this point, we don't have any buses that go to Greenfield or to Albany or I think it's the Schenectady connection, or do we?
We do have intercity bus service that connects over to Albany that, if I'm not mistaken, is actually
Rensselaer, probably, to the Rensselaer train station.
that Ross's program works with Vermont Trains Lines, a subsidiary of Premier Coach, I believe, to operate. So we do have some of these connections, but not comprehensive. There might be other opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
I would just ask about time-wise and content, where are we?
I think there's 2 more slides of content.
Oh, okay, we still have another 10 minutes here or whatever. I just want to make sure we're
Yeah.
getting a full update of the entire rail plan and that we're not going to let it get too sidetracked or not.
So this next slide this discussion's been a perfect segue into this next slide. And what I'll do is just say, we have a couple of grants from the Federal Rail Administration to investigate many of these things that we've been talking about. So those ridership figures that Zoe presented earlier are very rough, kind of back of the napkin order of magnitude. The Corridor Identification and Development Program funded through the FRA is a 3-step process, which we are just about at the end of the first step of developing scope of work and then conducting service development planning for not only the Vermonter corridor for all these scenarios we've been talking about, but also for the Western corridor and the Ethan Allen Express service to look at what are possible rail scenarios over there. And just to draw your attention to the map there, the red highlight at the top represents the extension to Montreal. And then the yellow Rutland to Bennington and then over to sorry.
Most importantly.
Okay, yes, I can't believe I mentioned those out of order, sir.
Yeah.
I'd like to call your attention to the yellow line at the bottom. Yeah, anyway, so suffice to say, there have been studies in the past. It's been somewhat dormant, and we do have bus services in particular in the western part of the state that have served some of the interest in terms of intercity or long distance travel. That said, there are other ideas about extensions and different passenger services in the western part of the state. There have been for many years, and we are investigating those right now. We're just done with the help of a very skilled consultant team developing a scope of work, and we're going to be looking at those more detailed service development plans for both of these corridors in the coming year or so.
Representative McCoy?
Do you have a bus service from Bennington to Rensselaer train station?
I think there is a service. It's not,
Bus service?
it's not one that we subsidize, I don't believe. I think it's, I forget from my time in the public transit program, but there is a service.
It's 200,000 or 300,000 we do subsidize.
Okay.
But you can go on the Amtrak website and actually link up and get a ticket, you know,
Oh, okay.
over to Rensselaer, but, yeah. But we need the real deal.
Next with it also.
We need the real deal. So where it is, you know, you said this, you know, a couple years out. Well, this report is due this July. It's not gonna have a recommendation of whether or not that Bennington.
Can you clarify which report? This
Shadow or the final, it said.
Oh, the rail plan, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the real, yeah.
Yes, of course. The rail plan is due and needs to be renewed by July for us to remain in good standing for grant applications and so on and so forth. This planning process is going to be kind of midstream during the summer and ongoing, so we won't have an answer per se, or even really a range of alternatives or outcomes in time for this iteration of the rail plan.
Where the rail plan has the general initiative as a recommendation.
Right. But the rail plan does capture these concepts. It's just that we won't have the detailed information.
How long are these rail plans for? I mean, is this like a 5-year outlook or?
The rail plan itself.
Yeah.
We're required to update them every 4 years, and they look out 20 years.
Yeah, so I mean, that's disappointing to say that Bennington's not gonna be in that report, like for.
Maybe I'm not exactly being clear. It will be, the concepts will be in the plan.
Yeah.
But we're still investigating the feasibility, what the service would look like, what the infrastructure challenges would be, what the price tag would be on many of these things. So while they're conceptually included in the rail plan, we have to kind of stop at that, and that we don't know exactly what we're getting into in terms of the details yet.
But I will add, though, of course, it's probably old, but there have been detailed plans on that. So hopefully those can be updated and it's not as onerous as.
Exactly. Yeah. This first stage of this corridor ID process has been inventorying what we've looked at over the years, and we do have a couple existing studies, correct?
I do want to make sure.
When the grandson orphan takes that.
Yeah. That's what we're talking about.
They'll still be asking like.
Pittsburgh Brandon.
So just to build on that, you had said if it's not in the plan, you can't get funding, but even in the concept stage, it's in the plan, so you can get funding. Okay, yeah. It just hasn't been completed.
And in these corridor ID grants are a perfect example of that. We wanted to do a more thorough analysis of these concepts in our plan. We got an FRA grant to do just that.
We want to introduce Dan to speak about bikes on trains.
Yeah, before we get there, I just want to, the committee, just to follow up. There's two things going on here. There's the statewide rail plan, which is a planning document that identifies all these things. There's the completely separate corridor ID program. Corridor ID program is an FRA program. And Representative Corcoran, I can assure you that the piece down to Bennington is in the corridor ID program, and it's been approved by FRA. So in the future, if there's an opportunity for grant money, that section from Rutland to Bennington and over to New York is included and is eligible for the FRA funding if we get it. So two separate things. The rail plan sort of looks at the goals and the overall plan for the next 20 years. But the corridor ID program is the eligibility for money, and that's totally separate things, both good things.
Good to hear. I just want to make sure that plan is in every possible document that's out there, you know, so we're not left out in the cold.
You are definitely not left out.
We call it the Tim Corcoran Express.
All right, yeah, so one of the things that was in the legislative update that we needed to give was there was a couple of questions about bikes and bikes on trains. So one of the questions last year that we were required to answer is why was the price of a bike on the Ethan Allen different than the price on the Vermonter? And what happened was, so I explained this when I was in a couple times, but we have agreements for the Ethan Allen, it's Vermont and New York. And then for the Vermonter, it's Vermont, Mass, and Connecticut. And we have agreements on how the cost and pricing get calculated and split up. So on the Vermonter, they had Valley Flyer pricing for bikes. When they first added bikes to the Valley Flyer, they had an introductory pricing of $5 a bike. And that was an introductory offer. That was not supposed to be a long-term thing. So it was $5. The national price for a bike to be added onto an Amtrak train is $20. That's what all the trains, in general, I'm not going to say that every train is $20, but the most common price for a bike is $20. That's what the Ethan Allen was. We were following the national average, and then the introductory rate for Valley Flyer was an agreement with Vermont and Connecticut and Mass to keep it the same. Well, they just upped the price on the Valley Flyer to $20. Vermonter's now $20. So anyway, all our trains match now. That's been resolved. We're not, one train is not different than the other train. So glad to report that there is no more confusion on what does it cost to put a bike on a train. Capacity issue. So when we did this many years ago, and we added bike rack to the coaches, we ended up taking up a space in the luggage rack area, and basically you had to flip the luggage rack up and then you put your bike in that same luggage rack area. So that allows one bike per coach. So we have 4 coaches and we can put 4 bikes. The cafe car doesn't have a bike, so we can put 4 bikes per train. And so in order to add more capacity, we would have to remove seats. And we are not maxing out. Now, are there times when we max out? Yes. But we are not maxing out bikes on the majority of our trains. So if you just look at the statistics, we have enough capacity based on the demand currently. Are there times when you need more? Yeah, sure. But for the most part, we're meeting demand. The other thing I would add is Amtrak is in the process of, we're going to have all new equipment in a few years from now. And they're in the design right now on whether it makes sense to add more bike capacity to the coaches. Now, remember, our fleet is shared, meaning the same coach that comes into Vermont today may be in Chicago tomorrow. So it's not the same equipment. So we don't always know what we're going to have for equipment. It's in an equipment pool, and we don't dictate everything that happens to that car and what the car looks like. It's a sort of a design by committee of all the states. And I will tell you that there's not a lot of states that are as active in the bike business as Vermont is, and they don't want to take seats out and put more bikes in. They're generating revenue based on seats. So there's not a consensus that more bikes is better than seats. So at this point, our capacity issue is going to remain the same, 4 bikes per train, and you have to buy a ticket for a bike. Now, you can also, if you have one of those fold-up bikes, those count as luggage, and you just bring them on, you don't pay. But if you have a regular bike and you want to stick it in a rack, you got to buy a ticket for your bike. And there's my update on bikes.
Check.
This is our final slide. We just wanted to share with you the overview of the process and invite everyone to participate. either by going to this web page where we have an interactive web tool that allows for commenting, or to participate in or share word about the upcoming second of 3 public meetings, which will be held on March 10th at 3:00, in person and remotely. We do a lot of posting of material on the webpage and invite everyone to visit there. The newest material is going to be posted there next week. And other than that, we'd be happy to take any further questions. And appreciate your thoughts on this.
Okay, check off another few spots on the, and we'll be hearing more from you after all those other next reports and deadlines. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And we are adjourned for this section, and we'll be back at a little after 2:15.